This document that you're going to see, we're going to talk through the highlights, is in full form on our website. So you can actually find the full draft land use and zoning ordinance on the city's website under Economic and Housing Development, and go to the Central Planning Board webpage and go to April 24th Planning Board meeting. There's going to be a folder that you can download the land use and zoning ordinance from that link. So again, you go to the City of Newark's website, you go to Economic and Housing Development, Central Planning Board, and you'll be able to go to April 24th meeting, and you can download the document. One of the reasons why we didn't bring it tonight is because it is 300 pages. So we were trying to save a few trees, but we do think that it would be great for people who want to go through it and get a sense as to what they see are in the draft regulations. But most importantly, we thought, let's talk about the changes in everyday language. So that's that document we handed out tonight. Okay, one more thing is that this document that we're talking about, the land use and zoning ordinance, is a companion piece to the master plan. So you might remember over the last year and a half, we did this extensive process around the master plan, Newark 360. And that's our vision for the next 10 years. So that's between now and 2033. So between now and 2033. So when we're talking about everything, whether it's the master plan and the vision or the ordinance related to land use, we're talking about what we want our city to look like over the next 10 years. And then by state law, we're required to do it again in 10 years. And why are we required to do it every 10 years? It's because the landscape changes. Development patterns change. People move in and out of the city, and we want to accommodate the needs that we have in our city for growth, but also allow our residents who have lived here to remain here. So a couple of highlights related to the master plan, and then we'll go right into the zoning ordinance, and I'm going to turn it over to Pallavi. So on the master plan, what you might remember is we talked about how do we better connect our neighborhoods and our commercial corridors. We talked about how do we support our neighborhood businesses. We talked about what else can we do to foster an airport city, or even have a citywide tree canopy. You guys know how hot it is sometimes in our city. We actually have something called a heat island. We have many heat islands, actually, and that means our temperature is hotter in the city of Newark than it is in other places. And that's partly because we need more green space. We need to be more resilient in our planning. We need to think about how cars and parking and traffic impact the pollution in our city. And how do we improve that through land use and zoning and development patterns in the future? We also know that we want to create an arts and education district. How exciting would that be to have one all along Broad Street, including NJPAC, the universities, Rutgers and NJIT, even going to Arts High School and going down to Lincoln Park. And who doesn't love the festival down in Lincoln Park every year? So we want to find a way to enhance the arts and education aspects of our city, and in addition, make us a 24/7 city. Like, that's a lot of what we're trying to do, which is create spaces that are exciting, livable, walkable throughout the city, no matter where you live. It shouldn't matter your address. We want to make sure that you have that same type of energy regardless of which part of the city you're in. And the last thing I'll say is that we talk about affordable housing. Many of you know that There's been a lot of reports out there. We have a need for over 16,000 units that are affordable for our residents. So finding ways to build housing that's affordable for residents in Newark is a critical part of what we're trying to do. And I know there's a lot of discussions about what's affordable, but for us, we mean affordable to not only our residents who live here, which our median income is about $34,000, $35,000 for a family of four, but maybe affordable to someone else is a family of four at $80,000 or $120,000. So we have to find a way to make sure we have housing that's affordable for everybody. So I just wanted to start off there and then really thank you all for coming out, because some of you probably came to all of our meetings in the last year and a half on the master plan. But this is a critical juncture for us because we want to go forward and get this ordinance approved. And so this is a very important part to hear back from you, some of your comments. And so I think right now what I'll do is turn it over to Pallavi, and she's going to talk you through some of the slides that are in front of you, and then we'll answer some of your questions.
I think what I'll do is I'll just go through all these slides and briefly explain to me what is it that this new ordinance is doing. You can definitely ask me questions maybe towards the end. And now that you know where the main ordinance is saved or where you can get it, you can compare these slides or the discussion that I have with you, and maybe you will be better able to understand what's in the main ordinance. Because it has a lot of technical things. It will be difficult to cover all the technical details and standards in this presentation. But I think by us giving you this information in bits and pieces, you will be able to understand what the ordinance is. Okay, so let me just talk about the major changes again, and I'll quickly go over them. What the new zoning ordinance is doing is basically upzoning most of the corridors. We're not talking about drastically changing neighborhoods that are residentially zoned, but we are talking about commercial corridors that have the capacity to increase density. And when I say increase density, what we are aiming at is increasing the number of housing units. Because with the current ordinance, it is difficult to have a lot of housing units and to meet the housing goals that the mayor has set for us. So we feel that these commercial corridors would be able to have more density, more units, and this way we can meet the threshold of affordable housing. We recently amended the affordable housing ordinance, and we feel that that ordinance, along with the new zoning ordinance, will really help us achieve the housing goals. So quickly, the corridors that we are talking about are your major commercial corridors, which already have a zoning of C2. So if you don't know about it, C2 is commercial zoning, which permits or basically mandates commercial on the ground floor and maybe residential or offices on the floors above. Right now, it is capped at 5 stories, but looking at the width of the corridors, we feel like we can easily go up to 8 stories. And if you look at the map of Newark, just by changing this C2 from 5 stories to 8 stories, you can achieve a lot of housing units. And most of these will be affordable units. Plus, you'll be able to meet the threshold of anything above 15 units. The developer has to comply with inclusionary zoning ordinance. Does anybody have any questions about that? And I can keep moving. Okay, so the next thing is replacing our redevelopment plans. If you are aware, there are a lot of redevelopment plans in Newark. I believe at this time we are over 10 redevelopment plans. You see the major ones, we have a couple of them around the downtown. There's, in the neighborhoods, there's Ken Brenner, there's Old Third Ward, there's Bergen Street, right? What we do is, although the zoning ordinance is changing the citywide zoning and it's not going to affect the existing redevelopment plans, we feel like there are some redevelopment plans that are outdated. we're not seeing a lot of development come in. We feel that this updating of the citywide zoning might leave those plans still more outdated. They will be left out in terms of zoning, and it is definitely important to bring them at the level of citywide zoning. So there's 3 plans that we will be including in citywide zoning, and those are, let me look at this, okay. Those are the Ken Brenner plan, which is a plan that was adopted, I believe, around 2009. So clearly it is outdated. And another indicator of us knowing whether these plans are outdated is if a lot of projects in this plan are headed to the zoning board, then that's a clear indication that the plan and its standards are outdated. We're seeing a lot of developers going for mixed use, for multifamily in Ken Brenner, which I think at this time predominantly is 1, 2, 3 family. But we do know there's major commercial corridors which could be upzoned without affecting the neighborhoods negatively. So that's one plan. There's another plan which is the Old Third Ward. If you don't know this is a plan from the 1960s. So you can imagine how outdated this is. And we have gone through like 21 amendments for this plan. So clearly, I think it's time to either amend this again or just include it in citywide zoning. And we think that the right way to do this is to include it in the citywide zoning, because this area will get a lot more better standards as compared to just kind of amending it maybe the 22nd time. So that's another plan. I believe the last one that we have is, it's called the Northern Fairmont Redevelopment Plan. It also goes by the name West Market. That's another plan that we are not seeing any development, and that's a sign that maybe it needs new standards. Maybe the time that it was adopted, the goals were different, and it's time to change the goals, because that's a plan that was also adopted, I believe, in 2009, so it has been a while. So these are the 3 plans that we will be folding into the citywide zoning. The rest of the plans, you might be more familiar with the Living Downtown Core. Those stay as is. I'll give you a chance to answer a question. No, go ahead.
Corridors that seem to have mixed zoning, so Hawthorne Avenue. On Hawthorne Avenue, you have a lot of parcels that are zoned C1,
Check.
and then you have parcels that are zoned R2 and R3. So it creates like an interesting corridor where if you just go block to block on the street, you have these four-story buildings, and then the next block over, you have multifamily, R2 homes.
I'm glad you asked that question, because although I am not including that in my discussion here, but since you brought it up, the plan is to increase the zoning in C2, and C1, which is already there, we are increasing the standards of zoning for C1 also. So if there is a corridor, again, let me go back and explain what C1, C2 is, and there's a C3 also. All the C zonings are for commercial corridors. They are regional, neighborhood, community commercial zoning. C2 I guess C3 is the one that is more dense. C2 is slightly less, and C1 is less dense, right? The whole initiative started by looking at the existing zoning. And what we saw is C2 zoning or C1 zoning or C3, right? What you want to see in a city is these corridors, these commercial corridors having some continuous pattern, right? And the current zoning lacks it. You will see bits and pieces or parcels that have C2 zoning that are completely disconnected from, maybe around the corner there's another C2 zoning area, but you need to have these connected in order to have a viable, successful, and lively commercial corridor. When you break it apart and have it in bits and pieces, that really does not serve a purpose. If you're driving down a commercial corridor, you do want to see a continuous wall of activity, or just buildings that have a better pedestrian-oriented or pedestrian feel. And when you start to break it up through zoning, it negatively impacts the corridor. So that was the whole goal. Upzoning C2, increasing the continuity of C2, and also upzoning C1. So C1 is another commercial zoning. Right now, it allows for 4-story. We have increased it to 5-story. And we know from driving around on these corridors, driving through these neighborhoods, these corridors can accommodate this kind of zoning. So the point that I'm trying to make is that we did not just sit in a room, have the plan in front of us, and decided that we could just change this. No, we drove around these corridors. We did an analysis, an assessment of whether these corridors would be able to successfully take this kind of upzoning or increase in density. And it does make sense because there are already some buildings that have that kind of those standards. You know, there's already some buildings, old buildings on C2 that are already maybe above 5 stories. So then that's an indication that maybe this is a corridor that can have more zoning, maybe more stories. So that was the whole rationale. But our whole change, this whole process that we went through, it started with the commercial corridors because we know that some of these corridors used to, way back then, were successful commercial corridors, but all of a sudden, retail just vanished, right? You see a lot of vacancies. I think retail is coming back. So we need that retail to serve the housing that's coming in too. It kind of goes hand in hand. You can't have one and not have the other. So that is what it is. You need the foot traffic for the commercial, and when you have the residential, you need the amenities and the commercial to serve these units. So that's what it is. The other initiative was that we need to make these communities walkable, you know, so you can have just pedestrian-oriented surroundings or standards that can increase walkability, right? So that is what it was. I think I spent too much time on the first slide, but let me move on, okay? The third one, the major change is zoning for more homes, and I just talked about it, right? How you increase the zoning to allow more units. So that is it. There's another concept that is ADU, but I'll get to that on the next slide, maybe. So let's move forward. Yeah, go ahead.
So right here, I see that there's zoning for more homes that you have spelled out right here, but there's no square foot requirements attached to that slide. So my question to you is, are you guys going to have new square foot requirements for, let's say, a 2-family right now? We would need a 25 by 100 square foot lot. Okay. So moving forward, would that change to a 3-family?
Yeah, so like I said, initially it will be hard to get into the details, but if you have a question, I will definitely answer that question. What we did is we did keep the standard lot size to 25 by 100, okay? So you can build your 2-family, 3-family on a 25 by 100 lot. That is a little change from the current zoning, because a 3-family needs a 35 by 100, but we are allowing you to have a 3-family on a 25 by 100 lot. What's also different is that in the current zoning, there is no standards for 4-family. We are allowing you to have a 4-family, but that lot size requirement is 35 by 100. So these changes, you can go on the website, look at the document, and it will give you the same table that the current zoning or ordinance has. One good thing is that we have not changed the format of the document. So if you are used to looking at this zoning ordinance, it will be very easy for you to look at the new one because the format has not changed. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so I have one more question. So, so one of the lots that I have are in a redevelopment zone. And I know traditionally speaking, the redevelopment zone supersedes the regular zoning of the city.
Yes.
So my question to you is, when you guys reimagine the new master plan, will the redevelopment areas be included into that plan?
Yeah, so one comment that I'm going to make is that while I said that there's 3 redevelopment plans that we will fold into the new zoning ordinance, And if those standards allow those parcels to have a 2-family, 3-family on the lots that I just mentioned, right? We will amend the other redevelopment plans to kind of have the same standards. I want to quickly make a comment about undersized lots, because I know the city of Newark has a lot of undersized lots. Some of them are 20 by 100. That's what we see standard size, right? And what happens is, because the way the zoning ordinance is worded, these developments on these parcels, even if it's a 2-family, it ends up before the zoning board. But through this new ordinance, what we are going to do is grandfather those lots and allow you to build a 2-family or whatever the lot size is, and if you're bringing a 3-family as of right. So you will not end up before the zoning board for a 2-family on an undersized lot. So the new zoning ordinance does take care of these undersized lots that almost certainly sends developers or homeowners to the zoning
Were
board.
there any plans to change the setback requirements to manage stormwater on site, which is very important for developers? I'll tell you, I have a project on Springfield Avenue, and to make the unit economics work, I would like to build either on the lot line or recess the rear of the building a little bit and do a blue roof to manage the stormwater, but the plan doesn't say anything or encourage that type of design work, a blue roof, et cetera, to make the unit economics of the project work.
I can't answer your question very specifically because at this time I don't know what you're building. What I'm going to say is that commercial development, right, mixed use, these building types are allowed to build on lot lines. If you are doing just residential, I feel like a minimum setback is required because you don't want to have a 2-family right on the public right-of-way. It just needs to have a better character with a little setback, a little landscaping. What that also does is give some privacy to the occupants of the home, right? So I think it's needed, and I would not take away that setback requirement, but I don't know what you're building, so I won't be. Okay, then bigger projects, depending on the zone, they are allowed to be built on the property line. Okay, all right. And yes, we'll take care of the green roofs, blue roofs, yes. The ordinance talks about it because it has some sustainable standards. The current ordinance does not talk about it, so yes. Okay, oh, moving on, okay. I also want to talk about one more thing about 3-family. If you know, 2 families, if you meet the standards of the zoning ordinance, you can go straight to permits. That is exactly what we will be allowing for a 3-family as well. If you meet the standards of the 3-family as per the ordinance, you can go straight to permits, and we feel that this is a game changer because there is no reason why a 3-family that meets the standards should be going to the board. The review is very simple. It's almost like a courtesy review. So we are cutting that process, and you go straight to permits. There will also be some kind of flexibility in commercial spaces. I know that in the C2 zones, C1 zones, or C3 zones, you are required to have commercial on the ground floor. But we do know that it is difficult to have tenants. You know, most of the time we force developers to put the commercial there for it to sit vacant forever. So our goal is to allow different uses there. You know, it could be a community space, it could be any other kind of space, doesn't have to be commercial the way that the current ordinance defines it, right? So there is some flexibility for developers just so that the space does not sit vacant. So that was the point that I wanted to make. Then there's the ADUs, accessory dwelling units, right? We have seen that this accessory dwelling unit strategy has been used in many places that have issues in meeting the housing requirements, right? What that does is if you have a 1-family, 2-family, or a 3-family, you can have an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, on your property. Now, there are some standards. I don't want to go into the detail, but I'll quickly mention it, that your lot size has to be 3,000 square feet for you to have that accessory dwelling unit. Also, you cannot exceed, I believe, 200 square feet. That's the size of the ADU that we allow. But you can look up these details, right, in the ordinance. By the end of the presentation, I'll give you my email address, so you can always email me questions if you have. So that's it. We feel that the incorporation of ADU in the new ordinance will further help in meeting the housing goals. There's different kinds of ADUs, there's attached, detached, but I would encourage you to go to the ordinance and just look at it, because it will be difficult to cover everything. And then just minor standards that the new ordinance will be updating. These are really minor standards in terms of transparency. Transparency meaning the glazing, window glazing. We feel like there's no reason for us to put like a certain number and force developers or homeowners to comply with that number. Because if you don't comply, it's a variance and you need approval for a variance from the board. We feel that these are unnecessary things. We should give you some flexibility. So minor standards like that, okay? Okay, moving on. I think I covered this. I'm on the page that says corridor upzoning, and I talked about this, right? The whole goal of this change in the zoning ordinance started with us discussing the commercial zones, commercial corridors, and how we started there by upzoning the C1, 2, and 3, and just having a better connectivity between these commercial parcels. So that is what it is. Again, what we did is C2, if you know, that is the one that people are most familiar with. C2 currently has 5 stories. We increased it to 8 stories. C1 has 4 stories. We increased it to 5 stories. I think I also discussed at length the slide that says replace aging redevelopment plans. But if anybody has questions, I can answer those questions. But at this time, there are 3 redevelopment plans that we will be folding into the citywide zoning. Moving on to the slide that says zoning for more homes. I discussed this, how we have changed some minor standards for you to allow maybe a 3-family on a 25 by 100 lot instead of a 35 by 100 lot. So just minor changes, but we feel that they go a long way. We also changed some other requirements where if an R3 zone only allows 1, 2, and 3 family, the new ordinance will allow more than just 1, 2, 3 family. It will allow a 4 family. It will also allow a multifamily, a low-rise multifamily. Okay. The next one again talks about the same things, C1, C2, so I will skip that unless someone has any questions. So there is a slide that has some images of 5-story apartment buildings, and you can do a side-by-side comparison of what a traditional 5-story, the old architecture in Newark looked like, and then there's a modern version that we are seeing a lot that's coming in. So that's just a little comparison for you. But feel free to ask questions. Yes, go ahead.
Any changes to the height maximums on 1, 2, and 3 families? Right
No.
now it's 36 feet, but no changes?
No change there. Yeah, no change there. I talked about streamlining small development. This was pertaining to the 3-family. So although it looks like just one change for 3-family to go to straight to permits, you'll be surprised. We get a lot of applications for 3-family, and this will just speed up your process, because we do know going before the board can take months, and you will be paying your bills until you get approvals from the board, right? Plus, it is not cheap to go before the board. It can cost you tens and thousands of dollars. So this is a game changer, okay? I also talked about the slide that says commercial use flexibility, because the current ordinance is very rigid in terms of allowing commercial space. We want to give developers the flexibility, and while commercial is not there yet, right, we still see vacancies. We feel like these vacant spaces could be put to better uses that are beneficial to the community. There's a slide that says accessory dwelling units. I won't discuss at length because I already covered it, but the little image there helps to show you what are the different kinds of ADUs. There's attached version, there's detached version. So the image is just helpful for you in understanding. And again, ADUs are allowed for 1, 2, and 3 family. And we feel that this is a game changer for historic districts where you have a lot of restrictions in bringing in new development, right? But we do want to help the homeowner earn some income by having these ADUs. So that was the whole goal. It achieves basically the housing goal, and it also helps in income. The next slide, updating building and design standards. Again, this is kind of referencing the excuse me, minor changes that I talked about. So yes, it does talk about minor standards. And I'm going to say this again. When you have this and you go to the website and download the 300-page document, this is going to help you understand. You can go to the specific sections or standards that you are interested in, depending on your development, your property. So that will be a good guide for you. And again, you can always email me with specific questions, but it will be hard to cover absolutely everything and every standard in this presentation. Okay, moving on. Okay, I think we are almost done. Do you want me to, Allison, do you want me to go through these images of the changes in every neighborhood? Yeah, okay. So again, this, it depends on which neighborhood you are in or in which neighborhood you have your property. But we have provided you kind of some snippets of the new zoning, I guess. The first is the Belmont neighborhood, and you can see that what you see in the center, that's the grayed out portion, that is the old Third Ward, and it's from the 1960s, believe it or not, going on Amendment 22nd. So at this time, it is just prudent to fold this redevelopment plan into the citywide zoning because it would offer more benefits in terms of the revised standards. So that is what it is. But look at it and you will be able to understand some of these things. We do have the legend there. So for some that don't know, yellow is usually residential. It could be, depending on the shade of yellow, it could be R1, 2, 3, 4. Red is usually commercial, again, depending on the density of that red color. The darker one is C2, the lighter one is C1. So things like that, okay? So moving on to the Dayton neighborhood. One comment about the Dayton neighborhood is that in the near future, there will be a new airport city redevelopment plan, and that is why we decided not to touch the zoning in this area. Because by way of the new redevelopment plan, it might be much more different than what the citywide zoning is, because clearly, just like the name suggests, it is more geared toward the airport kind of redevelopment, okay? So your R1s, R2s, C1, C2s are not going to work here. But that is for you to wait and find out much later. Okay, moving on to the slide of downtown. Again, everybody is probably familiar with Newark downtown. We have two main redevelopment plans there. One is the downtown core, which is pretty much centered around the Prudential Center. The other is the living downtown. And there's parts of a third redevelopment plan, which is called the Newark Riverfront and Public Access Redevelopment Plan. So downtown pretty much has things or parcels in redevelopment plans that we are not touching. If you know, living downtown, that is the most generous redevelopment plan. Your imagination is the limit there. You can go as high as you want, and pretty much whatever kind of use you want to put there. It's very, very generous. So we feel we should not be touching it. So we left it by itself, okay? But we will amend some of these redevelopment plans so that the standards are at par with the citywide zoning. They're not left out. And then going to the Fairmont. Are you guys able to follow me so far? Right? Okay. All right. So the Fairmont redevelopment plan, I think I talked about this. If you look at the top top portion of the drawing, there's a triangle gray area. That is the Northern Fairmont redevelopment plan. And believe it or not, we just don't see any development there. Like, I've been with the city for 6-7 years, and I don't even remember when a developer came in and asked about Northern Fairmont or wanted to build something. So maybe that's a sign that it needs to be folded into the citywide zoning. There's 2 other redevelopment plans that you see there. There is the, I believe this is the Ken Brenner, yes, Ken Brenner, and the Westward Model Neighborhood, which is a great plan, and we are not touching that redevelopment plan, right? That is one redevelopment plan that allows you to build on a 20 by 100. Yes, you're nodding your head, yes. So that's another very generous plan, and we feel that we should not be touching it, okay? So that's Fairmont. Feel free to ask questions. So moving on to Forest Hills. We only made some minor changes to Forest Hills. If you look at the map, the top right corner, you can see, again, the image on the left is existing zoning. The image on the right is the proposed new zoning. If you see along Verona Avenue, and that's exactly what I was talking earlier, if you look at those scattered dots, that's the scattered commercial, and it's very spotty. Like on a commercial corridor, you should really have a continuous commercial corridor, and that's what we tried to do. We just kind of changed the parcels from, I believe some of these are residential, we changed them to commercial, because if you are on a commercial corridor, you benefit from just having commercial zoning, right? You can have housing there. You could also do other commercial uses. So that's basically what we did. So no major changes, but just some minor changes along Verona Avenue and Bloomfield Avenue, because those are the 2 major commercial corridors in that section. Okay, Industrial East. The city is already working on a redevelopment plan for this section, and it is called the Forward Bound Doremus redevelopment plan. If you guys remember, and if any of you were involved, we did start this process. We had a lot of community engagement, and we almost have a draft version of the plan, but we put it on hold because we thought that the citywide zoning is a priority right after the master plan. So just to kind of give you some idea and timeline, right after the adoption of the citywide zoning, we will dive back into the Doremus redevelopment plan, and we'll do the similar kind of engagement. But I just wanted to put it out there. This is, again, a redevelopment plan that is more geared towards industrial uses. If you guys know Doremus, properties along Doremus Avenue and just the section that is shown on the slide, this is kind of a hardcore industrial area. You can't have residential zoning here. So the only thing that we are trying to do is clean it a little bit, make it greener in terms of uses, right? Clean, green energy uses, that's what it is. So we're not touching this section. Okay, moving on to Industrial West. Same thing, we are not making any changes. So I don't think the colors are obvious, but it's the color that you see is not red, it's dark purple, which is the industrial zone. So industrial zones, we have, like, again, 3 industrial zones. It's I1, 2, and I3. I1 is very less dense, light manufacturing. I2 slightly more, it's called medium manufacturing or industrial, and then I3 is your heavy manufacturing and industrial. And there's a lot I3 around Doremus. Okay, moving on to Ironbound. So again, we have not made any sweeping changes to the zoning of Ironbound. It is already dense. I think the one benefit that can come out of the new ordinance is, just the ADUs, because there's a lot of housing, 1, 2, 3 family, and you can have ADUs on your property. But we have not modified the character of this neighborhood. Also, the standards along Ferry Street remain the same. We have consistently stayed with 5-story height on Ferry Street. No redevelopment plan, no zoning changes has ever taken it higher than 5 stories. So even the new zoning ordinance will keep it at 5. It's just important for maintaining the character of Ferry Street. Okay, moving on to Lincoln Park. So Lincoln Park, again, it's more affected by the C2 zoning, and that is all we have done. Clinton Avenue, Elizabeth Avenue, and Broad Street, those are the main corridors, but we have kept the residential as is. But definitely the residential would benefit from the ADUs and the minor change in the standard of a 3-family, because Lincoln Park is a walkable neighborhood, and it's got beautiful residential homes. The next is Lower Broadway. Again, you'll see that this C2 upzoning or commercial upzoning is like a repeated theme in all these neighborhoods. You know, that is the major change. Not much, nothing else. Because we feel that commercial is needed. Okay, Lower Clinton Hill. Again, it has the same thing. The C2 zoning that extends along Clinton, Elizabeth, and just expanding the areas of C1. That is it. If you look at the slides, you know, up close, it's the C1 and the C2 zoning. That is the major change in the new ordinance. Then there's Lower Roseville. Again, the same thing. If you look at certain corridors, all we did is increase the continuity of the commercial corridors by zoning some of the parcels C2, and then right along C2, we have C1, because we feel that that density is needed just for housing and other commercial uses. Next is Mount Pleasant, and it's very obvious here. If you look along Broadway and Broadway, you can see what I'm talking about, right? It's more pronounced there. You see some spotty C2 zoning, right? We have turned that into a continuous commercial corridor. That's pretty much the change. North Broadway and Woodside, same thing again. This theme is just consistent, the C1 and the C2. And that is it, along Verona Avenue, Broadway. Okay, we're almost there, almost to the finish line. Port, we have not changed at all. Because again, industrial zonings, we have not changed. We know that there are many existing industrial uses, and we have not changed it at all. University Heights, same thing. It says here C2 zoning along South Orange Avenue, Central Avenue, and just addition of C1, because that just makes sense. So that's it. But feel free to ask questions. Then there's Upper Clinton. Again, you can see it very pronounced here. If you look on the left side of the image along Clinton Avenue, you can see the spotty C2. All we did is just made it into a continuous commercial corridor, because that helps in meeting the commercial needs of the neighborhood. That is all it does. You don't have to drive or walk to downtown. You know, your neighborhood commercial needs are met in your neighborhood. It just also increases the walkability. Then Upper Roseville, same thing. You're going to see more of the C1 zoning there, but again, that is the major change, C1 and C2. And just to let you know, this does increase walkability in the neighborhood when you have more commercial, more mom and pop stores, right? The neighborhoods just need to have that. I know some neighborhoods might have vacancies, but the zoning will really help in taking away the blight, the vacancy, and the more foot traffic, the more safe the neighborhood will feel. So we have multiple goals here, and we are just trying to achieve those goals of safety, taking away blight, taking away vacancy by upzoning it. Wakewick Park, same thing, but I would say here you will see more of the C1 zoning, because some neighborhoods, I think C1 might be better for them. And this is the last slide, I believe. Okay. This shows the Ken Brenner. If you look at the big square in the center, that is the Ken Brenner. and look at it, Springfield Avenue, even in the Ken Brenner redevelopment plan, this is a commercial corridor. All we did is increase the C2 zoning there. We have not, we did also put the C1 zoning because we are seeing projects, in our pipeline. All the projects in Ken Brenner are going to the zoning board, and homeowners, property owners, or developers are waiting a really long time. If our pipeline is 6 months out. So I think by changing the Ken Brenner or folding it into the citywide zoning, we are going to be able to address this problem. It just seems the prudent, right thing to do. At the time when Ken Brenner was adopted, maybe 2009, the city, the neighborhood maybe had a different set of goals. But considering that it was from 2009, things change, market changes, goals changes. Even some of the property owners are eager to have more density, more zoning or upzoning. And that is what we were mindful of. Again, this was not done arbitrarily where just a group of people sat at a table with a plan and we just took our markers and changed it. No, we drove every single street. So we did an assessment, right? And I wanted to just kind of emphasize that we drove the neighborhoods, we drove all the streets, and just make a conscious decision. If we thought C2 zoning is not right for this neighborhood, maybe C1 is, that's the decision we made. We just did not make any sweeping changes without putting any thought into it. So I wanted to close with that because this is the last slide. But feel free to ask questions.
As we get into questions, we just made land use and zoning fun, huh? How's not bad for an hour conversation about land use and zoning. It was a little bit of fun. We got to have Pallavi do this on a regular basis. But we will take some questions and a couple notes. One, we have our council president is with us this evening, Council President LaMonica McIver. She is also the Central Ward Ward Council member. So thank you, Council member and Council President, for the support and also for joining us tonight. Also a note, again, as we're getting to questions, is that in the master plan, Maria Ortiz reminded us that in the master plan, there are a whole section about community engagement. And it was a 60-page section of our master plan that includes everything we heard throughout that 18-month process. And so not only did the team go out and drive and see all the neighborhoods and hear the feedback, they tried to incorporate and match what we heard during the in-person meetings, during the virtual meetings, what we heard through the survey, and all the other engagements into the master plan. So it was a very collaborative effort. So, but really, thank you, Pallavi, for going through that so well and making it easy for all of us to understand and ask as many questions as we want. So, sir, you had some questions.
Yes. So the first question I had was, I see that there has been modifications made to the master plan today from the last time I saw it, because some of the C1s that were modified were actually C2s. So my question to you is this the final plan, or will there be more modifications that would affect density and what we can build as developers on these corridors?
No, so this is the final draft version, and I didn't understand your point where you said it's changed from the last time you saw. I'm not sure what that means.
So on 360, so on North 360,
Right.
the last time the Upper Clinton Hill section,
Right.
that section, the corridors were C2s, but 3 lots in, they had those also zoned as C2s, but I see this plan, they rezoned them to C1s.
Oh, okay. So while I can't specifically answer for those parcels, I will say this. Yes, after the master plan, we had another, I would say, drive-through sessions through the neighborhoods. And maybe that's when we changed our mind depending on what we saw. And maybe there might have been a slight change, although I don't know about those specific parcels that you're talking about. But yes, there might be slight difference.
Okay, I have two quick ones. I know other people want to speak, but when you were talking about specific redevelopment plans that will be rolled over into to match the new master plan, but when we got to the South Bergen Street redevelopment plan, you didn't identify whether that would stay as is or be rolled over into it.
No, that stays as is. There's
Okay.
only three redevelopment plans that I mentioned, Old Third Ward, Ken Brenner, and the Northern Fairmont. Those would be folded in. South Bergen Street is a newer redevelopment plan, and there were plans to kind of enhance that redevelopment plan. That's why we left it, because maybe it's not yet time for this plan to be folded in. That plan has to mature, just lack of a better word. Yeah, the redevelopment plan has to mature. Yes.
Okay, great. And my last question is there a timeline as to when the zoning ordinance will adopt this into?
Oh, I'll let Allison speak about
Okay,
that.
beautiful.
Yes, we are trying to move it as swiftly as possible. So we are having, so the City Council introduced the referral resolution for Central Planning Board on March 15th. It has now been officially referred to the Central Planning Board. In between the City Council's referral and the Central Planning Board meeting, we're having these community engagement discussions. And so any feedback that you're giving us tonight, as well as what will be heard at Central Planning Board, will be in the final version that will be submitted back to the City Council for their final consideration. That's exactly the way the state law tells us we have to, as you probably remember. So we have to first, as the administration, put the plan together. It goes to council for their referral to Central Planning Board. Central Planning Board considers it. The goal is April 24th, and then it goes back to City Council. So our expectation is that the City Council will consider this in May, and that would make this effective sometime in June. And that is expecting that all of this goes swimmingly between now and when the City Council is able to hear it for final consideration. So April 24th is the next big official date for approval. Central Planning Board. Yes. Oh, and also as a reminder, you can find the 300-page draft zoning ordinance on the City of Newark's webpage, Economic and Housing Development Department, Central Planning Board, the meeting date of April 24th. There's a link to a Google Drive, and you can drop down and see the entire 300-page document. Yes, go ahead.
It's just a quick question. You mentioned that 3 families on 25 by 100 foot lots no longer had to go to the zoning board, but you also mentioned that 4 families were now allowed on 35 by 100 foot lots. Do those require zoning board approvals, or are those by right?
No, not
Like, can they be
zoning
approved
board.
administratively,
Yeah.
like just putting the
If
plans
you're
in?
if you're building a 4-family in a zone that allows a 4-family,
Sure.
you will need board approval,
Okay.
not the zoning board, Central Planning Board.
Central planning. Okay.
Yes, but if you put a 4-family where it's not allowed, then you're headed to the zoning board. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
Great. More questions? Oh, parking. Okay, we can talk about parking. Let's see. Okay, so parking. What we've heard from our municipal council as we've been talking to them about the zoning ordinance is that we needed to have more discussion around parking. And so there's a lot of different perspectives and views around parking standards. So where the administration is and where Economic and Housing Development Department is that we would like to be able to move to lower parking minimums. That's what we want to do. We want to move to lower parking minimums. But what we know is that the reason is related to the environment and related to us having those heat islands I talked about before, or having concerns around traffic and transportation and the ability to have congestion that we don't want to have here, and our desire to create more walkable communities. So that's why we want to reduce the parking minimums. However, in the version that you see online, the parking standards are exactly the same. So the only way that we'll be able to consider it is if we hear feedback about whether or not your positions are on parking. Because right now what we're hearing is, and this is because we also go, like you guys go to planning board or zoning board or a council meeting, and you hear about the community concerns around not enough parking, or new residents moving into their neighborhood and taking their parking. And they're not taking their parking by, there's an ownership to it, but there's less parking for everyone who might be parking on a street. What we know, though, is that we want to be more pedestrian friendly. I think part of what Pallavi talked about was some of the zoning and upzoning along commercial corridors is so that we can be more walkable, so that you could walk outside down the street 20 minutes and be able to get to a grocer or some type of commercial establishment that you don't have to drive. So some of it is that our vision is to, from the master plan to the zoning ordinance, is to try to create these more walkable communities. But again, right now, where we are is that the parking standards are the same as they are today. But if we hear any feedback over the next few meetings that we're having, then we'll be able to incorporate that into our conversations with the Central Planning Board and the City Council going forward. Yes?
Not on the topic of parking, but I think something else that I know I've run into quite a bit is lots that fall just under the buildable lot size. So let's say it might be 25 by 95, right? Where it still makes sense, to put a home there, right? But it requires you to go to the zoning board to get a variance because you don't have the lot.
Right. No, I think I did make a comment about that, and no, we will not send it to the zoning board because
Okay.
we do have a little bit of latitude there. Let's say if 25 by 100 is needed, and you have what, 24.5 by 100. No, you're not headed to the zoning board.
Currently you are.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. It's
I
a
know,
nightmare,
yes,
yeah.
yes. So not anymore, though.
Okay.
After the new ordinance,
Sure.
not anymore.
Excellent.
It doesn't make any sense. Like I said, we don't do good by kind of clogging the board pipeline because it would anyway be approved. So there's no reason for it to be headed to the zoning board. Wait, 6 months, 7 months, right? And then you pay your bills. Property sits vacant, blighted. There is no reason. We do have that latitude, and after the new ordinance is adopted, we do have, I guess, legal basis also to just sign off on those things administratively. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Questions? Hearing no questions, it's about 7:05. We can let you go back to your evenings, head home to your families. But thank you so much for coming out. We will have more meetings if you want to come back. Not saying you have to come back, but if you'd like to come back, we'll have our next meeting on Wednesday, March 29th at 6 p.m. at Mount Carmel Hall at 259 Oliver Street in the East Ward. So Wednesday, March 29th at 6 p.m., Mount Carmel Hall, 259 Oliver Street. Then our third meeting will be Monday, April 3rd at 6 p.m. by Zoom. So that's going to be by Zoom. And then the last piece, again, you'll hear it again when we go to the Central Planning Board on April 24th. And so between now and then, you can call us, let us know, email us, tell us your thoughts about this, and we're going to keep pushing this new ordinance forward. We do believe it's in the best interest of our residents and the city development's growth, but also maintaining the ability for our residents who live here to still stay in our city. So again, thank you all for coming out. We'll see you soon, and thanks again. Good night.